A recent article from Kiplinger discusses 5 keys to a solid retirement income plan, and they all start with the letter D. So join Mark and I as we talk about how these 5 Ds apply to your retirement plan.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself to talk about the 5 Ds. Of course, Liz is the founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors, and you can find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. And the 5 Ds, it sounds like, sounds like a superhero ring or something. I don't know, but it's it's an interesting article, Liz, and we'll put a link into it for people if they want to check that out. But it's an interesting framework as well for, folks to think about. And I guess, do you agree with the 5 Ds? These all seem to make pretty good sense to me. And, so I'm curious to get your take on them and how they would, kind of work with inside building an overall structure. So it should be a good conversation.
It will be. And I do think that these cover the majority of what a plan should cover.
Should have those in there. Okay. All right.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's start with, the order is a little weird, but we're going to follow their order. So the first one is diversification, which totally makes sense, right? I mean, obviously owning something more than just a basket of mutual funds. We know this, right? So we want to have to think about having that clearly in every plan.
Right. And that's talking about our portfolio diversification, which is important. And we hear about that all the time. And I think that may be why it's first in the list, because that's such a common topic to think about diversification.
Sure.
And in your portfolio, obviously, as you're approaching retirement, you want to have a little bit different investments than you had when you were working. Your diversification will change somewhat because you're now older, you're no longer working, you're no longer adding to that pile. But beyond that, the article talks about income diversification, and that also is key. Where is your income coming from? Social Security, pensions, are you pulling from IRAs or taxable accounts? Where is that income coming from? And then I think even more importantly, we need to think about tax diversification and where the money is coming from, how much is being taxed, how much are you keeping, how much are you having to send to federal or state income taxes, and what can you do to control that over your lifetime and minimize that so you actually have more to spend in retirement.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Liz, because tax diversification certainly is one of those things we need to be diversified in as well. And often the focus gets put on the income side of things, and rightfully so. But you certainly still want to have, those different taxable buckets going on. And I guess the only reason I thought maybe the order seemed weird is because the second D is duration, which is basically our life, right? How, making it last as long as we do. So it kind of seems like that's always number one on these lists, right? Is making your money go the distance just like we do, or hopefully do.
Right, exactly. That makes me think of the non-financial side as well as the financial side. So on the non-financial side, how long are you going to live and how well are you going to live? And we could have said under diversification, well, you need to be thinking about what are the hobbies and the activities and the social circles and the exercise that you're doing so that when you reach that 85, 90, 95-year-old self, that you're still able to really enjoy life. But duration then becomes, how long is your retirement? That's what it means. So how many years do you need to plan for? And what's that going to look like? And this is what makes people very nervous because none of us know how many years that is.
Right.
And we don't know what's going to happen in those years. Not only to ourselves.
Guarantees something will happen, though.
Right.
I mean, life's going to life, right? No matter what.
Yeah. And what's the economy going to do? What's the market's going to do? What's going to happen to our health or our spouse's health? There's so many unknowns that it makes it nerve-wracking for people at the outset trying to plan for that many years. And so that's why it's important to really have a plan, even more so than any other period of time. Know what your expected cash flow is, and then put together a plan to help you support that. And that's where in my practice, bucket planning comes in. I help clients set up a bucket plan where we're aligning the investments to the different time frames. So we have that short-term bucket, that midterm bucket, and that long-term bucket.
Yeah.
And that allows us to make sure that we can cover those short-term needs without a lot of volatility, but then we can also have the growth that we need for however long we're going to live. And you need to plan for longer years than you think you're going to live, because over time, life expectancy continues to go up. And with all of the medical advances that are happening now, it could go up even more than we're thinking. So you want to make sure that you have accounted, or allowed for more years than you expect, and then balance that out with making the most of those earlier years so that you can really enjoy them. Because, again, we never know quite what's going to happen.
Yeah, and tying these things all together too, right? I mean, like, so duration, diversification, duration are going to play together. The tax side of that, the short, the mid, the long, right? All that as well. And it walks you into the third piece. And again, all of these will interloop with one another, Liz. So it's important to kind of see how they all play together. And the third D is downside protection. Now, you just talked about duration. You live longer. You got more risks out there in various different categories. And when you're younger, you can shrug those off like we do most things in life, when it comes to a risk standpoint, because we're younger and we heal faster and so on and so forth. But again, downside protection is an important piece, especially tied back to that duration side.
It is. And there's a lot of studies about the time frame that you retire in those early years, and having a market correction in the early years can truly impact the future success of a retirement portfolio. And so that, again, is where bucket planning comes in, because you're able to create a war chest for that short-term money and allow the long-term money to be in that environment where it may have some fluctuation, but you're not going to use it for 10 plus years. So it's also got the room to do exactly what it would have done if you were still working. It's got the room to come back and be what you need it to be in that future period of time. And balancing those out allows the plan to do what it needs to do. You want to make sure that you're not taking unnecessary risks, that you take the risks that you should have, that you understand by working with an advisor what amount of risk do you really need to make sure that you are accounting for that duration that is ahead of you. And then match the investments to the job they're going to have for you. Do you need this particular bucket of money to be liquid so that you can cover expenses? Do you need it to have safety? Do you need it to grow? Match those jobs to the right investments, and that will allow you to navigate and weather whatever the future markets and economic cycles are. You'll be able to weather those because you've got what you need when you need it.
Yeah, and downside protection is not a bad thing, right? I mean, obviously, sometimes people are like, but the market's been doing so great. I want to get all I can, and it's like, well, yeah, but you also really don't want to be super exposed to a potential downturn either, so I mean, or at least a big one, right? So, I mean, we know there's going to be that roller coaster. We know there's going to be some volatility. I mean, the time we're taping this morning, Liz, I mean, the market's down a fair bit to start the day because of Treasury yields, right? So, I mean, it's always going to be something, right? There's always some little piece that's going to make it wobble. So that's why you want to talk with your advisor about that, some of that downside protection. And everybody's feelings on that are going to be a bit different too, right?
They are. And there are some people that are very timid about the volatility and become quite conservative, which means they're sacrificing their long-term growth that they need to keep up with inflation. And other people that, like you say, don't want to miss out on any growth. And that means that they're sacrificing their ability to meet that short-term cash flow without dipping, selling things at a low. In between, in the middle, there's a balance. And that's where the bucket plan comes in, because it tells you what you need for each of those different buckets. And you're not guessing. It's based on analysis. It's based on an income plan. And you know that you are able to cover the cash flow in the different time periods. And you're able to do that well and do that safely and do that with what you need to cover current needs plus future needs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an important piece of that conversation, which I kind of like it being in the middle of the five here, right? Certainly is an important piece there. So let's move to also another really interesting D, and one we have a lot of control over, and and what kind of trouble we get ourselves in with it, and that's the discretionary income. Because Liz, we've talked about this before. It's easy when you're saying it's time to work with an advisor. It's time to pull my my information together. Here's the basic expenses. Here's what it costs us to live. But that discretionary income, that's a sneaky Pete. And a lot of times when you're doing the analysis for folks, I'm sure many people are like the first time they're coming in, they're doing the plan, they're doing the strategy, and they're surprised to see how much they're actually spending, right? All that little stuff, that nickel and dime stuff we just sometimes forget about.
Yeah. And what I find is that most of us, because we're at the point we are in our careers and in our income versus income needs,
Right.
we're not really paying attention to every dollar.
Right. It's the
We
big
don't
ticket
need to.
items. Yeah, we pay attention to the big ticket stuff. Yeah.
And so when people are beginning to think about their retirement income plan, they don't really know the total amount that they're spending, and they forget about a lot of things that are maybe a one-off, or I'm only going to do that every 3 years or every 6 years. And yet those things still need to be accounted for in the plan in order to know that you have enough. If you're going to be replacing the automobiles, or you're going to be putting a new roof on the house, or different things like that, you got to have that in the plan, as well as your basic spending. When I look at cash flow, I think about 4 layers. You've got your basic necessities, that's your needs. And then you have the things that you want to do on top of that: your travel, your hobbies, your entertainment, new cars, things that you want to do. Then you have the things that you would like to do if you could. And you have your wishes. And things like that could be, maybe you'd like to have a vacation home, or you'd like to have a boat. And maybe you wish that you could give quite a bit to kids and grandkids while you're living and still have enough for yourself at the end of life. Or maybe those are vice versa. The giving to kids is what you'd like to do, and you are wishing for a boat. But whatever the case may be, you want to think through that income plan, make sure that those basics are covered.
Yeah.
And then see how much room you have. And when you're thinking about the basics, you've got to go back and make sure that you are thinking about those things that could come up from time to time, but they're not necessarily in the last 12 months spending, because you didn't put a new roof on the house in the last 12 months, or you didn't buy a new car in the last 12 months. And so they're just not in what you're looking at when you say, oh, here's what I'm spending. You want to make sure that you do a really good, you sit down and take the time to think through all the things that you might spend over retirement that you need to have money for. Then you can begin to define, okay, what is over and above that? And how much of that over and above what I need do I have the ability to fund? And what's that going to look like? How does that impact my bucket plan? And for a lot of the people that I'm working with, they do have the ability to fund some of that discretionary stuff. So we're talking about, what are your go-go years versus your slow-go years versus your no-go years? So in the early years of retirement, in those go-go years, retirees tend to spend more. And then it begins to really slow down, which is why we call them the slow-go years.
Right.
And then it could slow down a lot in the no-go years, but you may end up with some health concerns down the road.
And it could balance out, on that regard, right?
Right.
You wind up spending just about the same, so, yeah.
Right. The end years could come back to be as much as the go-go years, just because you're having to spend on some healthcare costs or things like that. One of the strategies that's really good is guardrails. Thinking through how much the portfolio, the investments, how much income could you spend each year based on what you have now, and then establishing some guardrails so that if things go really well, then you could move that spending up. But if things don't go as well, then you could move that spending back for a bit. And that helps you stay on track so that you don't overspend early on and you don't underspend and end up with a whole lot down the road and you didn't get to enjoy it. So there's a balance there, and that's where the planning comes in, looking at how does this balance look for you and what makes sense for you based on the amount of risk you want to take and the things that you want to do and what we think inflation is going to be. That's a really big one. what inflation could do to your future spending and making sure that you're accounting for that. Because a lot of times people are thinking about it just in today's dollars.
Oh, yeah. And certainly we did that for a long, long time until we got, rudely awakened to inflation, post-COVID, right?
We are more aware of inflation now.
Yeah.
But the Senior Citizens League did what they called a loss of buying power study from 2000 to 2018. Okay, so this is pre-COVID. And they found that for retirees, inflation was 3.8%.
Okay.
Which is higher than
Probably
inflation at the time.
I was going to say, oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah.
So inflation at the time across the nation was around 2%, between 2 and 2.5. I'd have to look it up for that exact time period. But this was higher. And so that's important to know because retirees tend to spend on things that have a little bit higher inflation. Better food, better entertainment, better travel, better doctors, all
There's a
of
premium
this stuff.
there to some of that stuff. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a bit of higher inflation for retirees, and you want to account for that in your plan because you do want to have that lifestyle. So you want to make sure that you're accounting for the kind of inflation you're going to have as a retiree, as well as the kind of spending you're going to have and how that's going to change over time. It does naturally decrease over time. So you're not looking at, well, we're going to spend this amount in the first year. We're still going to be spending that at age 85. Not likely.
Gotcha.
It's likely going to have gone down somewhat.
All right, well, let's get to the last D here. Obviously, that was a big one there, the discretionary income. So the final D of the 5 Ds is it's a drag, Liz. And basically, this just refers to anything that's eating away at our overall returns or our portfolio or our plan over time. And there could be a couple of things in here, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think some of the big ones that we think of are what is happening with the cash that we have.
Inflation, like you just talked about, is one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so any cash that you have is not keeping up with inflation, and especially if people are just leaving it in their local bank instead of finding some kind of high yield savings. And a lot of times people don't take action on that because it's easy. The bank account is there. It's just a little bit of effort to find that high yield savings and move the funds, but you can get, instead of 0.1%, you can get 3 to 3.5% today, and it's been even higher than that. Another drag is your fee drag. And people don't necessarily think about this one because it's not so obvious most of the time. A lot of those fees are internal. You don't see them. They're inside the mutual fund.
Yeah, I think most people go, my guy or gal charges me 1%, right, to do the work for me or whatever, and that's my fee. But it's like, yeah, but what about the fees of the products, right? So,
right. There can be fees in the mutual funds, fees in the exchange traded funds. Those are lower. There can be fees if you have target date funds and you have a fund that has funds, then you've got 2 layers of fees.
Right.
And we've talked about that in a previous podcast. Or sometimes people have variable annuities, and those can have very high fees built inside that product. And people often don't even know really, why did I get this and why do I have it? So that's really important to look at and think about. One that we talked about recently is the tax drag.
Yeah, big one.
And how big a cost that can be if you're not planning to minimize your taxes over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that one definitely is the big one that can chew away at things. So,
and then the other big one, I think, is the healthcare costs, because if you're, again, not careful, you're going to have high IRMA costs. Those rates could go up in the future. What people are going to have to pay for Medicare, it could go up. And so minimizing your future healthcare costs today by, again, doing some of that tax planning, that reduces your tax drag, and it can reduce your IRMA surcharge because you're getting things shifted around where you're not going to have as much income. That increases taxes, increases IRMA, and those things can help you have more to spend. And that's really the key. More for yourself.
An efficiency there, right? Almost kind of takes, almost like the 2 birds, 1 stone kind of thing, right? So you want to certainly work your way through that. So those are the 5 Ds, right? So diversification, duration, downside protection, discretionary income, and drag. 5Ds, one plan. The goal is to build a retirement that holds up over the long haul. And if you need, some help running through these 5Ds of your own situation and you're not currently working with Liz, or even if you are and you just want to go through it again, I'm sure she'd be happy to obviously accommodate. That's part of the ongoing, check-ins and checkups and all that good stuff. But if you need some help, reach out to Liz, have a conversation, bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com, so you can get yourself onto your best path for retirement. And Liz, thanks for breaking down this article from Kiplinger this week.
Very good. I appreciate it. It was a good conversation, and look forward to talking to you next time.
As always, exactly. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatever app you enjoy using. She also has her YouTube channel. Find all that information at bestpathadvisors.com on the good stuff. Lots of good tools, tips, and resources there. Again, at bestpathadvisors.com, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.